Well, good morning, everybody. I can see people joining our webinar. I can see the numbers going up. I hope you can see me and hear me. I'd like to welcome you to the UDO Sentinel Crisis Simulation webinar, which I'm delighted to say we're presenting in conjunction with the BCI. The Business Continuity Institute is the world's leading resilience organization. For those who don't know, I'm Jim Preen, Director of Crisis Management at UDO Sentinel, and I'm joined by my boss, Richard Stevenson, who's the Chief Executive of the company. We make crisis management and crisis communication software. Sentinel allows you to send mass notification alerts, share documents, communicate via chat channels, and attend instant conference calls. And I should say a lot more besides as well. But let me introduce my guest now, Richard Stevenson, boss of UDO Sentinel. Richard, would you tell our audience a little bit more about your professional experience? I'm going to put a slide up here as well.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jim. Good morning, and I appreciate we've got a very nice and varied international audience here today, so which is good. Yeah, essentially, you could describe me as an entrepreneur, and but the current business that I'm chief executive of is a very exciting business that we built up. We've actually been operating this business since 2003 in various different guises, but generally all about the digital supply of content really online. And in 2015, the opportunity was clearly in front of us for improving the way in which people managed crisis. And a lot of the fact that we could do this great instant documentation stuff meant that we were well set for that. So we built a whole load of tools, and we have a great team, and I'm very excited to lead this team in all sorts of exciting opportunities. But my background is, I'm a material scientist originally, and spent a lot of time in computer development, and over the years have led a number of businesses, both private equity and in public and in private companies, as we're doing now. So thanks, Jim, for that introduction.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Richard. Well, it's a bit of a tradition on these webinars for those listening to post in the question and answer box where you're listening from. Now, I'm broadcasting today from a rather grey London, central London, just looking out the window there, and Richard's a bit further north from me in a town called Clitheroe in Lancashire. I don't know, what's the weather like up there, Richard?
Well, it's pretty well similar, Jim. It's drizzly and grey, and there's not much hope on the horizon, I'm afraid. It's one of those things where it's lockdown depression, really, and etc. And it's not depression. I'm not talking about a weather front, you know. So yeah, we're hoping the sun will come out soon.
All right. Well, yeah, absolutely. I hope so. So anyway, why don't you put in the question? Oh, I see people. I see people are already doing that. Yeah, here we go. Okay, we've got somebody listening from the Wirral in Merseyside. So I'm guessing my English geography is terrible, but that's not too far from you. We've got Justin from North Essex. Overcast. We're getting weather reports in, Richard. This is excellent. And yes, overcast.
Real time.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So if everybody put in where you're listening from, it would just be very interesting. We quite often get people from Australia and India and so forth, and that's kind of fun for us. All right, now we've got Ireland where the pubs are closed. We've got TL from the Netherlands. We've got someone from Derby in the UK. It's currently raining. I love this. This is hilarious. New Brighton from the Wirral. Oh, we got someone from Granada in Spain. I love Granada, going to the Alhambra there. We got Bristol, listening from Trinidad. Well, that's magnificent. Tisha, thank you for joining us. A bit closer to home, we've got Hatfield in Hertfordshire. We've got Mark in Coventry. Well, this is great, guys. You're all entirely welcome. So you see, you get a cyber attack, you get a cyber exercise, and you get weather reports on this webinar. What more do you want? All right, let's move on. Before we get to the simulation, I'd just like to sort of take the temperature a little bit of our audience and ask this question. Have you ever been involved in handling a real cyber attack at work? And I'm going to launch a poll asking you this question, and hopefully you can see this now. I'm launching the poll. Okay, there's the poll. Should just say, can you just vote on this, please? No matter what the extent of your involvement. If you had a cyber attack at work and you had to deal with it, is that the case? Have you had to deal with a cyber attack? So while people are voting, I should just say that during this simulation, as we reach decision points as we go along, as the scenario unfolds, I'll be laying out polls to you and give you suggestions as to what decisions you might take, what direction you might go to overcome the crisis. So you can expect a lot more polls to come now. So 69% of people, 70% of people have voted. I'm going to close this poll fairly soon. So it's last dibs on this poll. Who has actually been part of cyber response at work? 73%. Anybody else voting? Come on, I'm sure we can get a little bit higher than that. You can just say no if you haven't. All right, 70, all right, almost 80% of voted. So I'm going to close the poll and I'm going to share the results now. And hopefully, Richard, can you see those results?
I can see them. Interesting,
Yeah. I mean, is that kind of what you would expect, or I'm a little unsure, to be honest. What's your thought on that?
Well, I think that the thing is that when we talk about cyber attack, most people's understanding of that is something very, very serious that relates to possibly a ransomware or something like that. Of course, every day, everybody is in fact subject to phishing attacks and various things that are running on email scans across their organization. So that's a sort of constant background level of attack there. But it's interesting that 50% have not yet had a serious cyber attack. I would say that's where I might expect the answer to be at the moment, and I would expect that 50%, if we did in a year's time, would be down at about 30%.
Right. Okay. All right. Good. Okay. Well, that's fantastic. I'm going to hide those results now, and we're going to start on the crisis simulation proper. So I'm delighted to tell everybody who's listening that you all have new jobs. You're now working in the financial sector, and you're part of the crisis management team at BuzzBank. BuzzBank, a fictitious bank, unfortunately, so no massive salaries for you all who are listening in. But I expect you'd probably like to know a little bit more about your employer. And this is BuzzBank, and it's a digital mobile-only challenger bank based in the United Kingdom, founded in 2013. It works in both retail and banking sectors. You've got a few stats there about the bank. And just to say, I'm not going to read them out. You can read them for yourselves. But just one thing to say is that the bank has about 1,400 employees, and most of those now are working from home, as indeed I am, and I have a suspicion that most of you are as well. Okay, so that's who you are. You're part of the crisis management team, and we're going to launch the first start state for you to see what's happening. So just give me 1 second here. I'm going to launch this. Yeah, here we go. So here's your first start state. So you're part of the crisis management team, and you get an update from the IT team, and they confirm that BuzzBank is subject to a cyber attack. Malware is present in the systems. The Buzz banking platform is only working intermittently, and IT are trying to discover the extent of the problem. It may take some time, apparently, to determine the extent of the problem and whether the attack is still ongoing. Customers are also reporting problems with internet banking, some big investment trades about to go through, but the dealing desk can't access to check client positions. They want to know what they should do. Staff are already, but there's word going around that word is going around that the bank is subject to a cyber attack. Staff want to know what's going on, and there have been a few journo calls as well. So what I want you guys to do is just get across these facts. You might want to take a screenshot of that possibly, or just make some notes and so forth, because what we're going to do is I'm going to come back with our first poll once you've got across these facts, which is all about activation. Which team should be activated right away to try and redress this problem, to try and fix the problems that BuzzBank are having? So it's all going to be about activation. I'm going to go quiet for about 30 seconds now, just to let you get across these facts, and then we'll come back with our first poll of the simulation. So I'll be back with you in a moment. And I should just point out that unfortunately BuzzBank is also featured now on Twitter. You're part of social media, which is not in a good way. So that might be a little problem that you're going to have to figure out. Just go back to the other one just in case you need to see that. All right, folks, let's I hope you're across those facts, and I'm going to launch our next poll. So which team, and here it is, which team needs to meet right now? Is it the senior management team, which we sometimes call gold? Is it the tactical team, silver? Is it the comms team, perhaps the retail sales team? We'd very much like you to vote on that now. We'll take a look at how you vote, and then Richard may have some thoughts on what he would, the team that he would like as a chief executive would like to see launched. Obviously, we're thinking in terms of a medium-sized bank here, so they would have all those teams available to them. And I see people are voting, 48%, 60% of people have voted. Let's just leave the poll open for a little bit longer, just to get your thoughts together. And I should just say, folks, while you're voting here, there isn't, on these polls, there isn't always one exact answer that fits, but we want you to focus on, and if you have other ideas, if you think I've missed a team that should be there, then you can put that in the Q&A and you can challenge us on our discussions about this. As I say, we want to try and make this as interactive as we possibly can. Well, this is interesting. I think this is going to be good. So 80% of people have voted. All right, last dibs on this, and I'm going to close the poll and I'm going to share results. So Richard, I hope you can see that. And I'm quite interested by this because it's kind of evenly split between the senior management team and the tactical team. I've got some thoughts on that, but what's your thought, please?
Well, I think that they're definitely right as far as nobody actually said the retail sales team. And the thing about the comms team is, I know that people might have said that because they're thinking that things are already moving on Twitter. But until you actually know what you're going to communicate, you really don't say that's the prime team. So it's interesting it's split between that. I think that's probably reflects the fact is that there might be a bit of parallel activation that people would see going, but clearly I would definitely think that an attack of this nature on the bank would actually immediately require the senior management team to form, to actually set out the principal objectives of, and to try and set the first actions in motion. And one of those actions will be probably the activation of the tactical silver team. And one of the things that you've always got to decide upon the nature of an attack is who is actually leading that team. It may not be necessarily straight out the box of you've got the right leader for the right team, and I think the gold team, senior management team, are the people that probably need to define how that's going to be done. So my money would be on the senior management team being the first one that's alerted, Jim.
Okay, that's great. I should just say that Frank has asked the question, what about the business continuity team, which I'm guessing would be activated anyway. They would be a part of this, working with the IT team. It depends where the business continuity team sits. I guess there could be a member of the business continuity team sat with the senior management team. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I'd also think that actually the tactical team is normally a multidisciplinary team from all the different departments, but clearly business continuity is a very important part, certainly of the silver team. If not in some organizations, there'd be someone on the gold team, but clearly the business disruption is clearly going to happen, so business continuity is a vital element to get alerted very early on.
I've got a good comment here from Lee, and I have some sympathy with this as well. He says, I think the tactical team are closer to the ground. Initially, the tactical team should be stood up to gather the data and make the initial decisions if needed, and probably yes, in this situation, it should be then escalated to the gold team. It depends on the trigger points in their crisis management plan. That's a good point, right?
Yeah, it is a very good point, and that's why it's one of these questions when you put up their things is people hesitate between which one would you click on.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
In very many circumstances, I think the idea of assessment, of basically the situational awareness of saying what has actually happened, is very often the work of the Silver team to actually do that. So we're trying to explore the right way to do things in this hypothetical situation, but in very many organizations, the Silver team would probably take the lead in assessing exactly what is happening, and then going to the Silver senior management team to brief them once more data is known. I mean, the fog of war, basically, when this thing first happens in a cyber attack, it happens so quickly. Trying to assess what's going on is a technical skill, and that is often clearly the senior management team, in order to make a decision about the right way to deal with things, needs information and facts. So there is that comment is very valid in terms of, and you're right to be sympathetic with it, because it is clearly in certain circumstances you don't know what your strategic objectives need to be until you've got more information on what's actually happening on the ground, and that's often coming from the tactical team, the Silver team.
Yeah. I mean, Lawrence makes the point, we assume the tactical team will already be in operation and informing goals, which could well indeed be the case. I mean, what I've seen in the past, Richard, when I've been working with banks and crisis exercises and so forth, is that the senior management team is escalated and kind of sets a direction of travel, looks at the strategic element, and then hands that on to the tactical team, to Silver, for them to action that what they want, what the direction of travel. And then quite often the senior management team will be stood down, and then we'll come back on again a few hours later to review the situation. Is that something that you've seen in your professional experience?
Yeah, so when I was chairman of Affinity, it was a financial services company, and we had, we had a massive risk profile because we were processing, something 3 trillion persons of payments to various members of the armed forces and many other things like this. So there was always a problem of what would happen there. And taking the point that's been raised so far is that really, from the board's point of view, if I was being informed that we had something, I'd need the information. But actually, my first instinct to say I need more data, and that's really going to come from the tactical team. So yes, I want to be informed, because that may dictate the very high level communications we need to do, but you can't really make decisions as a gold team until you've got much more data points, much more information, and that is really where the Silver team really comes in.
Yeah, and of course, getting the right information and filtering out the useful. I mean, some people say that there's never enough information in a crisis. And my opinion is sometimes there's too much. It's the wrong kind of information. So filtering out what is important at the time so that the senior team can make the best decisions that they possibly can. All right. Well, now what have we got? Okay, I've got a point from Ronald. And by the time they inform the gold team, the attack would have gone wayward. Some decision needs to be made quick in order to mitigate the attack and contain the attack, then inform the gold team. Okay, yeah, I think we're good with that. Thank you for that, Ronald. All right, we're going to move on now. And unfortunately, BuzzBank is now in the news. Whoops, there we go. There's a crisis up. I beg your pardon, I've got the wrong one here. Where are we? Okay. Okay. All right, here we go. So you're in the news now. This is breaking news. A Challenger Bank victim of cyber breach. BuzzBank is the latest victim of an aggressive cyber attack. It's thought large parts of the bank's IT systems were affected, with staff unable to access key client information. And there's some more. I'm not going to read this whole thing out to you. Once again, if you want to take a screen grab of this to see this, basically you're in the news for all the wrong reasons. There's a bit more information here, so please have a look. See at this. Please have a look. See that the new information that you have here, and get across that. And I'll be back to you in about a minute's time. So you can see there's a bit about people working from home. Richard and I have done quite a bit of work on this about weak passwords and routers and so forth, and enabling hackers to install sniffing software. So that's a news report featuring BuzzBank for the wrong reasons. And now I'm going to ask you about is what the top task you have to undertake right now. What would be the top task that you would need to undertake? Where would your efforts, where would you want to focus your efforts and resources? Would your top task be comms related or IT related? So here comes our third poll. Let's just get this together. Here comes our third poll. What's your top task right now? And I'm going to launch this poll, and you can vote on this. So you can see here, hopefully you can see that. What is your top task right now? Is that to reassure customers that the data is safe and secure? Should you speak to the media? Would you find out more about the data breach, open communications with the hackers, or perhaps send a memo to staff? So we'd very much like you to vote on that, please, now. See what you think is the most. I mean, once again, it may be that a couple of these things are going on concurrently, but which is the most important thing that you would want to undertake right now? So people are voting. We've got more than half people there. 70%. Anybody else going to vote on this? What is your top task right now? Okay. All right. People still considering. And as ever, if you think there's something else that should be done, please put that in the question box, and we're very, very happy to discuss that. If you think that I've left out something that you think is even more important, right? So it's quite interesting. I'm seeing the results now, which are good. Okay, guys, we're up to 82% of people have voted, so I'm going to close the poll now. Last chance to vote. Close the poll, and I'm going to share the results with you. Richard, I'm going to pass this over to you. What do you think?
Interesting. Speak to the media is way down.
Before you start, Lawrence has sent in, and he said all of the above. Okay, yeah. Fair enough. Fair point, Lawrence. But people have voted largely to the extent of the data breach.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Jim, you're giving everybody a really tough time by choosing one of those things.
I
know. But it's part of this is actually probably saying where the weighted effort needs to be. What's the most important thing you get out of this thing, And I think that I would agree that the extent of the data breach is probably the most important thing you should be trying to work out, because that is the thing that is going to be able to, you're going to be able to mitigate the effect by understanding the scope. And that's actually much harder than you think. And it may take a lot longer than people think. When people report they've had a data breach, they make various statements to the press saying, well, we're not aware of any data that's been used in a malicious fashion. Well, it takes actually a long time before you to forensically figure out what your data breach is. So, but you certainly do know, if you're an international organization, for example, whether in fact it's been across your whole organization globally, whether it's spreading, it can actually move through the organization, and you need to understand that very, very early on. But this is a public-facing bank, so when things get in the media, ultimately, whether you get through this as a bank in the future, how well you deal with your customers is going to be extremely important. However, making a statement to say that customers that their data is safe and secure is what the customers want to hear, but it may well be you don't know that.
Yeah, and actually, Richard, just to interrupt, Janet is making this point as well. I don't think you should reassure customers unless you know what's going on for sure. And I think that's right, isn't it? I mean, you don't want to say something that's going to be entirely contradicted in an hour's time or something.
Yeah, sorry, well, the TSB problem, where they've got into a complete muddle and the chief executive started to make statements and reassuring everything was okay. And then, of course, information just flowed out to show it wasn't okay. And that just really undermines people's confidence, particularly when the dust settles afterwards. So you have to be very careful about reassuring, but I think you do need to, as somebody said, all of the above, but many ways. I think what you need to do is to clearly engage, but be very careful about making statements until you have a full understanding of what's going on, which is where this finding out the extent of the data breach is probably the top priority.
Just a couple of points that people are writing in the question box. Chris is saying, and it's a very good point, shouldn't you, the priority being informing the regulator? Now, we know you have to inform the regulator in 72 hours, and they're keen for you to do that quite, much more quickly than that. Whether you would want to inform the regulator right at the start, I don't know, but it's certainly a really good point, right?
Yeah, I don't see why people are hesitating informing the regulator. Yeah, I think that once you have it, and the people have got heavily criticized by saying we haven't informed the regulator because we don't think there's been a data breach, and only after maybe a week or two forensic investigation they find there is a data breach, and at that stage they're in some degree of difficulty. So I don't think there's any downside in informing the regulator right at the start, and they definitely appreciate that. I agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, a few other comments. Mary says, just a general point, reputation is always paramount. I don't think anyone here would disagree with that. That always needs to be borne in mind. Rob is saying, I think it should be a 50-50 split between investigating and reassuring customers. I mean, certainly you're going to want to reassure customers as soon as you've pretty much got a sense of where the situation is. Lee is saying, I think stopping the bleed should be a priority, also to go hand in hand, comms both internally and externally, and I think that's a really good point. As staff in a cyber attack or any kind. Richard, could you just put yourself on mute for a second? It's kind of a little noisy at your end there. Sorry to do that, but that's great. Thank you so much. I think in any kind of crisis, particularly a cyber crisis, keeping your staff informed is super important. That's for sure. We've got a few other points here. Okay, that's good. Okay, 72 hours is not consistent for all jurisdictions with their regulators. Okay, so everybody should know how quickly you have to inform a regulator in your particular area. Let's face it, yeah, okay, we're talking about the press there. Okay. This is interesting from Simon. In the UAE, it's 24 hours from discovery of a material risk event that you have to inform the regulator. You've done some work in the UAE and Middle East, Richard, I think, is that right?
Yeah, yes, I have. And I think the point about different rules, if you're an international company, is really vital, because it may well be the data breach may have started, say, in the US or the UK, but if it's in fact affected the UAE, that communication needs to take place, and they are pretty hot on this and getting this information, and the fines can be pretty big if you don't do it properly. So, but you made the point about memo to start. I mean, obviously in a cyber breach, I mean, this could be actually the first thing you need to do is communicate with your staff to say, don't go onto your computers, don't touch this, shut down, because one of the first things that the IT team or the cyber security team is going to do is probably disconnect people from the servers or disconnect people from the internet. So how you communicate to your staff is going to be something people need to think about, because that often is the first thing you need to do if it's a major cyber attack.
Okay, I mean, there's a couple of comms points. We haven't really got to comms yet, but a good comms point. Your first comms will be that you're aware and investigating, and that's to all stakeholders, and that's absolutely so. It's some form of holding statement. And quite an interesting question. What could be the impact of not informing the press? Richard, do you want to? I've got some things to say on that. Do you want to take that for a second?
Well, I think people are very nervous about talking to the press, and but if you don't, the press make it up anyway. So I think that
I used to be a journalist. I think I take exception to that.
Jim, there are no sacred cows here, but But essentially, they want to write a story, and they're desperate news. And they also will look for people either used to work for you or people that are in the periphery that are working and give commentary. You do need to open a channel with the news medias and make sure that you have a friendly posture. And I think, but you have to be very careful about how you communicate. And that's a lot of training, as you know that, Jim. You've done a lot of people who training people how to talk to the press. But I would always open a channel to the press fairly early on in the game, I think. So at least you're making sure you're part of that story.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly, if it's quite clear that you've had a cyber breach, then at least you would want to put out a holding statement so that, basically you're getting a message out to the public that you're aware of a problem and that you have a plan in place to fix it. So, and then thereafter, it's just, I remember so well with Talk, how the Baroness Harding, she was caught out terribly. She felt that she had to go quite early in front of the cameras, but didn't have all the information. And then when she was asked whether the Talk data was encrypted, she had to say that she didn't know. And not, for a chief executive to say they don't know something like that is not a comfortable place to be, that's for sure. All right, let's start moving on here. We've got a new crisis update for you. This is something from the IT department once again. Hackers, it looks like there is now a data breach. Hackers claim to have seized thousands of sets of Buzz customer data, which includes names, bank account details, credit card numbers, and addresses. They've sent this to BuzzBank, and our intelligence team are saying that they look genuine. What else have we got here? They're demanding a ransom. There's now a ransom demand of 5 Bitcoin. You can all go and look. You can all go away and look up how much 5 Bitcoin is, and say if BuzzBank don't pay within the hour, they'll drip feed further data online. And now we have another problem for you here. There's a couple of celebrities are saying that authenticated. Well, that it's being said that authenticated private investment data belonging to 2 celebrities is being posted online. That's, the papers are going to love that. And yeah, journalists are asking more questions. So once again, folks, I'm just going to give you a few moments to get across those facts. And we're going to come back, and I think we're talking about, yes, we're going to talk about your communications, external communications. So give some thought to that. While you're getting across these facts. So I'm going to go quiet for 30 seconds, take a screen grab of this, or just get across the facts, and we're going to come back and we're going to get you to think about what your comm strategy is going to be. Should just say that Tisha has said here that it's kind of comms related, controlling the narrative is key to ensure that the company plan is in place in dealing with the issue. Dan has just come back with how much 5 Bitcoin is. I don't know if I should tell you or whether you should figure it out for yourselves. But as Dan has done that, I guess I can tell you it's £36,700. So not insubstantial, but yeah, there we go. All right, guys. If I hope you're sorry if I'm rushing you, but let's launch this next poll, which is very much to do with communications. Here we go. What is your external comm strategy? And I'm going to launch this poll now. So you can select one of the following. Do you draft a holding statement and send it to the press? Do you get in touch with the celebrities? Do you draft a holding statement and wait for the press to get in touch with you? or do you hold a press conference? Are we going to put the chief executive out and hold a press conference? What do you think? What would be your external comms strategy right now? I mean, I know once again you might think you want to do two of these things, or maybe more, but if you could focus on the most important one that you would like to do now. Dan is adding to his Bitcoin knowledge, or adding to our Bitcoin knowledge here. Do companies know how to purchase Bitcoin? Well, actually, Dan, we're going to deal with the ransom demand after this one, so we'll probably get your input on that. But it's a good point. You know, do companies know how to get hold of Bitcoin to pay the ransom if they would want to do so? Obviously, that's quite a big decision to do that. So where are we with our poll here? So 77% of people voted. Anybody else want to vote on our communications poll, please? Oh, and I see Frank is. What are your thoughts on paying a ransom? Frank, we're going to come to that in a moment. Okay, all right, great. Okay, Lee is suggesting there should be a holding statement to the press, but also a separate holding statement to customers, and that might be true, but in my experience of a comms person, they should be pretty similar. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll, and I'm going to share the results with you. So, Richard, what do you think? What have we got here? So, a fairly clear, yeah, it's a clear majority, definitely, of drafting a holding statement and sending it to the press. Any thoughts on that?
No, it's interesting. That's just continuing the holding statement. You know, you've now got the press writing stories about celebrities, etc. The holding statement isn't necessarily going to address that. I noticed that the hold a press conference down the bottom is only a few people saying they would. 6% of people would say that.
Yeah, I think it's too early to do that, I would say.
Exactly, it's probably too early. And by the way, the CEO is probably the best person to put in front, but only if the CEO is capable of dealing with the press, and that's, you know, not all a lot of CEOs didn't actually get to their position because they were great at doing press conferences. So you've got to sort of really think about that. So that would be a bit more of a risk. You don't know enough information yet to hold a press conference. I think that's probably right. I agree not to get in touch with celebrities. Let that take its course. And I definitely wouldn't wait for the press to get in touch. I think you've got to be on the front foot. So I would go along with the 74% of putting that holding statement there. And you try and make that not just purely a holding statement, but something that, you know, does address the things, not just a sort of bland statement which the press hate, but you know, one that is, as one of your questions came in, or answers came in, was you know, talking as if you're talking to the customer as well, because the customers are reading the newspapers, and that communication is really important for them.
Just a good point that Adele has made. Adele says, as part of external comms, I think it's important to notify staff not to talk to the press or post on social media. I mean, that's that is a tricky one, because I mean, I think you're right, and Adele, I beg your pardon, Adele, I think you're right. It just doesn't always quite work out that way. Have you had any experience of that, Richard? People talking to the press?
Yes, but I have, but also a lot of our companies we work with have, and I think that's the vital importance things that's different now in terms of how we communicate with our employees. We can't ignore them now, because they're all publishers. Everyone is capable of publishing on Twitter, Twittering something on Facebook. So keeping our own employees in the dark is actually a real hostage to a set of problems here, because they may be running on half-truths, but if they happen to work for the company, you know, their tweets may have much more traction because it's coming from within the company than somebody who's just an outside commentator. So I think rule number one is make sure all your staff are fully informed as you're going through, continually through. Whether you can completely block them from tweeting is a difficult one. It depends upon the type of organization you've got. Obviously, that more or less could be in their contract terms, you know, of working for the company, of confidentiality. But in reality, we're all pretty loose now on how we're exchanging what we might do on WhatsApp or on Twitter with what we're doing on the company, and the lines are pretty grey, so we can't rely upon that line being followed. And you need a few loose tweets to get out and to get trending, and you've got a problem. So I think if the company is being really open and honest with the staff, that helps a lot. And anything they do push out is then more likely to follow the company line. So, but it's a very, very good point.
I mean, there's lots of really great points come in just now, Richard, which I'd just like to quickly take you through. This is from Simon, consideration of media policy on negative posting. It has to be accepted, not deleted, to avoid a posting storm. Chris is saying you have to expect that journalists will be asking staff via social media. Seen it happen, and this is absolutely right. I mean, I used to be a journalist, and all the journalists I know who are on a breaking story, they've got a Twitter feed on their phone. That's what they're looking at, and what they're looking for is people who are tweeting who have, are either at the company involved or have some kind of access, and those people, the journalists will immediately send them a message asking for more information, or maybe doing an interview or whatever. So, in days gone by, it was people didn't really know how to speak to journalists. Right now, you can be speaking to journalists and you don't even know it until the journalists get in touch with you. Interesting cultural difference here. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Kuzu, I think it is. It depends on culture. I used to work in Japan. Apologies in a press conference is more important in Japan, and I know we've seen that in the news. I've not worked in Japan, but I know an apology is super important. Richard, do you have any experience of that or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Japanese apology is very famous, and that's absolutely essential. To take responsibility and to apologize. And I think that's culturally baked in many Asian countries, particularly in Japan. But I would say also it's something which we don't do well enough in other countries. I think we're all too afraid of if we apologize, then in fact we'll get a whole bunch of lawsuits. But you can apologize in the right way, and the Japanese are the world's professionals at apologizing the right way. We could probably learn a lot from the Japanese on this point.
Yeah, indeed. And another point from Lawrence, which is absolutely right. The media would accept the statement from the organisation involved, would immediately demand access to C-suite personnel, and so that's a decision that when do you put the boss forward, or when do you put a spokesperson forward, and who do you put forward as well? These are all things that the comms department should have in place ahead of time, and the C-suite should be media trained and all that kind of good stuff as well.
I think the timing is very critical, Jim, because there was a major outage in Heathrow for British Airways and total chaos and everything else, and the CEO of British Airways took a huge amount of time before actually standing up in front of the press, and that became the story. Where is he? He's disappeared.
Yeah, is he hiding?
It became the story.
As well, with Where's Mark Zuckerberg? I remember that.
Yeah, and I think his name is Cruz actually. So, but that didn't go down well. So everybody was negative by the time he was standing up and talking. So I think there is a really good time for actually going in front of to have a press conference, but it's not right at this moment. I think it's coming up shortly.
Yeah, and also if you put your chief executive up straight away, there's nowhere else to go. So it's not. It is a real judgment call, and perhaps we're not going to get into that whole conversation now. But it is crucial as to who you put up. Maya is saying, would you we've kind of addressed this. Would you apologise for the issue that customers are experiencing? Sure, you would apologise, wouldn't you?
Definitely.
Why would you not?
Those are the type of apologies that you need to do. People are, as I say, afraid of it because they might say it means that we're somehow liable. But it doesn't matter. I think as far as the customer's concerned, they're inconvenienced, and it's really important to empathise. And empathy is the key trait that needs to come across in any communications. And frankly, the customers are having a really bad time, very afraid, very things. You have to apologise in the right way for that.
Yeah, indeed. And just the one thing I would say about that is as well that what really irritates customers, if people keep, if somebody from the firm keeps apologizing, initially that's fine. But if it's continuously just an apology, and nothing seems to be done to fix the problem, people get really irritated with that. So, there should be an indication of what companies are doing to fix the problem, and actually indications that the problem is being fixed. Otherwise, apologies can turn sour quite quickly. One more I've got here about social media. You need a standing social media policy as part of employment conditions. I mean, I guess for big companies that's true, isn't it? Is that true?
No, I think that's very important, Jim, and I think that a lot of people's employment contracts don't cover those points. And I think that that is the time we live in. We do need to have policies in there. Then it's very easy for a company to enforce the policies and remind people of those policies. But if they're not in there, it becomes much more difficult.
Okay, look, I'm gonna have, gosh, time is running. Oh, I can't believe it. Okay, we're gonna need to get on a little bit here. I need to launch another poll, and we've already talked about this. Dan has raised this. Going to launch the poll here. So, what's your response to a ransom demand? I mean, this is an interesting question here. You could run a whole webinar just on this. Do you pay the ransom? Do you contact to discuss the situation? Do you ignore the threat? Do you contact the police and the NCSC? That's the National Cybersecurity Centre. That's in the UK. I apologise for people listening overseas, but do you contact the police? You probably would have contacted the police already. Okay, people are voting. Half of people are voting. Oh, it's definitely going one way here. All right, but I think there are things to be talked about here as well. Okay, please can you vote straight away, because we're a little bit short of time here. 70% of people have voted. Anybody else want to vote, please? Because I'm going to close the poll now and I'm going to share the results. So it's overwhelmingly you contact the police, but I guess you would have done that anyway, Richard, yeah?
Yeah, you would have done, and I'm very pleased to see that people are not going to pay the ransom. I'm very puritanical about that. We just feed the criminals, and there's no certainty that you're going to get your data, by the way. So a lot of that is going to be permanently encrypted or permanently scrambled. But no, it's the right thing. So good, we've got some good people on the call.
But just to knock back on that a little bit, Richard, is that people do pay the ransom, though. I mean, generally speaking, I know that people who have had their computers locked have paid, a small amount of money to get their data back. But people do, ransoms are paid, right?
Very much in the States in particular, and unfortunately, the cyber insurance industry is paying ransoms, particularly all of these local towns and counties that have been actually held to ransom. That's happened a lot in the States. And the insurance industry is deciding, often that just lets it pay it, which is a trend which I'm not very happy about, but you're right, Jim, ransoms are being paid. For that, so it's a trend. I think maybe 30% of these attacks are being paid out to ransom. Yeah,
I mean, I worked with a bank that will be nameless a year or so ago, and we're doing a cyber simulation with them, and it turned out that they didn't have a ransom policy anywhere on their books. And it is, like a social media policy, all these things need to be figured out ahead of time. So, you might say, right, we're never going to pay a ransom, but that needs to be considered. I mean, just to say that Dan is saying maybe that a relatively small ransom demand may be considered for payments. And then Ronald is saying, I know of companies that have paid a ransom, and he's asking the question, is that right or wrong? Well, that's a moral maze for you. I guess it's wrong because actually, one thing I would say that people might not know, it's technically speaking not illegal to pay a ransom unless you know that money is going to be used for terrorist or illegal activity. Of course, how the hell would you know that? How would you know that? I mean, it's probably quite likely that it would be, but just, you know, on the very highest level, it isn't actually, strictly speaking, to say it's not illegal. Now, whether it's morally right or wrong is another issue.
Yeah, it's a very difficult one. You're looking after your company, your shareholders, you want to get back to business as possible, but actually you're just encouraging further ransom attacks and just feeding the beast, basically. So we know it's morally wrong, but companies do it in order to get out of the hole they're in. You know,
yeah.
Most important thing is to have solutions. Have all your stuff backed up, have your policies in place, be able to get through the attack, and is the most important defense of this thing, because it's going to happen. Ransom attacks are on the increase hugely, so there are ways to be prepared for this.
Indeed, indeed. Well, Frank is saying, isn't hacking cyber terrorism anyway? All right, Frank, you got me there.
Yeah, it is.
Ronald is saying, cyber insurance for critical data is an emerging industry, and that's true. People do pay insurance. How good this? I must admit, this is not my area of expertise. Do you know anything about this insurance industry involvement in critical data, Richard? Anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an increasing. It's the fastest growing segment of the insurance industry at the moment, but there are certainly in Lloyd's of London, for example, there is a sort of capacity for the number of firms that actually are offering it. And the only thing is that the data points for actually saying what they should charge for it are a bit thin, because the amount of information is only a few years old. So at the moment, sometimes cyber insurance is incredibly expensive, and so some people are taking the view to self-insure, but it is a very fast-growing area, and your general insurance policy might not cover things. But because of this being quite young, the small print is massively important. There are whole reasons of exceptions, particularly if in fact the attack may come from a state actor like Russia or China, then that's regarded as being an international bit of cyber terrorism, which isn't probably covered by the policy. So read the small print if you're going to buy it.
Okay, all right. Well, we've got lots of comments here, good comments. So I'd just like to, in fact, there's one I know you know about. Jenny, yes, Jenny raises Nord's Hydro, an excellent example. Didn't they, is that right? Did they pay a ransom?
No, they didn't. And it cost them a lot of money, but they got back to running, and they were massively hit.
Oh, so I beg your pardon. I read Jenny. I beg your pardon, Richard. I read Jenny's comment wrong. She says they didn't pay a ransom because of their values, but it cost them millions to come out of the crisis. Yeah.
About 45 million. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Right. What do we got here? Okay. I'm just trying to find. Okay, many companies have ransom policies for kidnapping. That isn't considered unethical. Cyber being different is interesting. So if people are actually kidnapped, then they might, I suppose, pay a ransom to get their people back.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, kidnapping policies is a responsible thing to have to if you're sending your executives to some strange places around the world. But yes. And you are feeding the same sort of terrorists, but so yeah, I do accept that. Okay. There is a big moral maze here that we have to navigate.
Yeah, well, and in fact, Frank is saying perhaps by paying a ransom, one is supporting an immoral industry and feeds hacking, when of course he's absolutely right on that. Yeah. All right, folks, we're drawing towards the end of this simulation now, and I'd just like to get your thoughts, the people who are listening, and to get Richard's thoughts, is where would you go from here now? What, you know, in the sort of days and weeks ahead, what are you going to want to be looking for? Clearly, you're going to want to make sure that you know the extent of the attack, the hack. You're going to want to make sure you know the extent of the data that you've lost. Your IT department is going to be looking at fixing these problems. Your comms department is going to be all over this, because this is going to take a big hit to your reputation. Richard, can I just start with you? Where would you be looking? Where are the areas that you would be looking to get BuzzBank over this in the short to medium term, if you will?
Yes, I think you, on one of your slides, you said that they were making progress in restoring data, and I think again, the customers are the most important part. You know, these sort of things can be disproportionate hits at the time, but also they can fester for some time because you haven't handled the crisis well. So communications is really vital. The technical skills and what you spend on trying to fix it. This is probably, you know, almost a sort of unlimited budget for a company like Buzzbank, where you need to get on top of the IT solutions, and you need to have external help probably to do that. So making sure that we get through this crisis from Buzzbank's point of view is obviously restoring the systems. That is the first priority, so the customers can continue to trade. If there's been data loss, then how you deal with your customers and look after them and give them various free policies that have been done, like British Airways did, for example, on Experian and things, where they could actually look at whether they were being subject to further hacks or any elements of that. All those sort of customer wraparounds that you want to do to look after the customers that are infected, and be quite prepared to put into the cost of your cyber breach is in fact proper compensation for customers. You can't get away from these things fairly scot-free. You have to actually be seen to make sure that customers aren't going to be losing out from this. And that's a statement that you need to make pretty early on. But there are some parts that you can't compensate people fully for, and that is the loss of their personal data and things, which is going to be on the dark web for a long period of time. So, I mean, customer-centric is what I'd say, Jim. Really, that's the most important thing.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it was something we didn't quite have time to get to, but I had another news story which I suppose I could just put up here for fun. I think, let me just have a look here. Oops, yeah, sorry, where is it? Yeah, I mean, obviously, the one thing that we haven't really talked about is that the two celebrities, my two fictitious celebrities, obviously this would give it, especially for the tabloids, this would really give the story a boost and could cause, you know, a lot of pain for the bank involved. If you get a couple of celebrities, you know that it's going to be all over Twitter, all over social media. But anyway, that we really didn't begin to address that, but that would be a huge problem, I think. All right, guys. Richard, I think we're going to draw this to a close because our hour, amazingly, is just about up, and I'm seeing already Adele and Mary are saying they've got to dash. Lawrence is saying thank you as well. So, Richard, thank you very much indeed for you know, extolling your wisdom there and getting all that across during the webinar. Just about brings us to the close of the simulation. I hope you found it fun and useful. I really appreciate it. Thank you all very much for putting your points in. It's been really useful and really interesting for Richard and I. There will be a recording of this on our website shortly. Our next webinar, which I think is going to be on people going back to offices, staff moving back to offices, is going to be at the end of July, so watch out for that. But in the meantime, folks, thanks so much for joining us, and it's goodbye from Richard and goodbye from myself as well. I'm going to shut this down now. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.